Hello and welcome all of you once again for Outbound for Dummies. Outplay brings you a series of learning sessions on improving your outbound function, your outbound strategies, helping sales reps perform better and achieve targets. And today is one such amazing session. Today's topic is going to be on how to sell authentically in the age of AI. Hi, I'm Praveen. I work in the founder's office at Outplay, and I also am part of the GDM function at Outplay. And very happy to have with me today Jeff Kirchick. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Lovely, lovely. A quick intro on Jeff. Jeff is, who better than Jeff to talk about authentic selling, because he's an author of a book, Authentic Selling, How to Use the Principles of Sales in Everyday Life, right? And he has helped a few companies to successful exits. And currently, he is the VP of Sales at Able. While Jeff is an active speaker, advisor, and investor, I'm sure he's also actively selling, importantly, with authenticity. All right. Like I said, today's topic is going to be how to sell authentically in the age of AI, because Gen AI has kind of taken over many functions and many roles. For example, email, bot calling, auto responses, etc., have become so common that sometimes the human touch is lost. And I personally feel in sales, you need that human touch. Now, will this trend help in selling better? I'm not too sure. And that's exactly why we have Jeff today to speak about authentic selling, right? Jeff, if I have to quickly jump on, right, what does authentic selling mean to you in the context of AI-assisted sales?
Sure. Well, yeah, great question. So there's a way that I define it in my book, and there's a way that I'll define it here because they're not exactly the same, but they're related. I think that the way I define it in the book is to treat the customer like they're a really good friend or a family member or something like that. But the reason for that is because of the other definition, which is, I think, to present an honest version of yourself to other people. Now, that honest version doesn't need to be a great person. It doesn't need to be the most likable, funniest person, charismatic. It just needs to be an honest version of yourself. And the reason I like these two together is because you generally will present an honest version of yourself to people that you like and trust. You know, your best friends, your family, things like that. You don't really need to put on a facade for them. You can be very open and vulnerable with those people. And what I found is that people really gravitate towards others if they feel that they are presenting that honest version of themselves. And I'll give many examples of that later. But the reason it's so important right now is because, and I predicted this in my book, which came out actually about 3 years ago, that you're going to see all this influx of AI in the world of sales. And what's going to happen is once it becomes commoditized, a lot of the effects that are supposed to be beneficial, like personalization, things like that, they actually start to become commoditized. So then, the buyer doesn't have more time all of a sudden. They still have a finite amount of time to spend with you, right? So it's not like that's changed. So what are people going to be able to do to adapt in light of this, this change? And the way, ironically, the pendulum swings back to humanity. The way that you will stand out from the crowd is actually to lean into what makes you human. To be clear, that doesn't mean that it doesn't coexist with AI. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, during this episode. But that's my take on how I would define it.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, like I started the session itself, right? I mean, humans connect to humans in the entire process of sales, right? But AI is evolving. And today, I think AI is very prevalent in an SDR process, right? I don't think any SDR, BDR today has, writes any email without using a chat GPT or equivalent, right? Now, in that sense, considering that everybody is using AI in some form or the other, how do you see the role of authenticity evolving, right? As more and more SDRs are becoming used to AI in their processes.
Sure. So I'll tell you what is my number one no-brainer thing that everyone needs to start doing. So the advantage that a human has on AI is humanity, obviously, right? You have a story to tell, you have values, you have of all these things. Now, with all this AI stuff, you're hearing a lot about personalization. I can use generative AI to write an email to somebody and it can, personalize the email and things like that. Well, the thing is that when everybody's doing that, the emails actually don't feel personal anymore. If everybody is reaching out to you about the same thing or whatever. It's kind of irrelevant. I'll give you an example. Someone could reach out to me and say, "Hey, Jeff, I saw you wrote this book, Authentic Selling. Great, good stuff. Anyway, I'm here to sell you this product." It's like, well, it's great that this person did their research on me, but I already know that I wrote the book. So they're not teaching me anything new, and they're not relating it back to them in any meaningful way. Now, here's where this is the tip. The tip is that it's not personalization that's going to allow people to stand out. It's shared values. How can you take something about an individual that you are targeting and then relate that back to you and show that you are part of the same tribe? AI can't do that. AI doesn't have a self. It doesn't have a life story to hearken back to when it's reaching out to someone. It can't say, "Hey, I saw you went to this college. I went there too," because that's just a lie, right? And so, that's the big advantage that people have. And I'm happy to talk about why it works, but that's something that I know works because I've done it, quite successfully.
Yeah, but do you think that today SDRs are kind of abusing the use of AI? Because you were talking about, things getting commoditized and the importance of telling a story, telling values, and so on, right? But still, do you think SDRs can leverage AI to personalize outreach without compromising authenticity? In what ways can they do that?
Of course. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of mundane tasks associated with prospecting that have to do with researching the right individuals and at the right time. AI can give you really good intent signals and all sorts of data on who to reach out to and when, and it can surface it for you with contact data and even a pre-written template before you even have to think about, what to do, right? So those are all ways that it can be very helpful to somebody. Another example is you have tools like Lavender AI, which is coaching you on how to write a good email. I advise a company called Humantic AI, a company based out of India, gives you the personality insights and how to speak to the person in the right way to what greetings to use and what kind of language. So these are all things that can assist someone and make their job go faster and a lot easier. You're automating a lot of the stuff that, quite frankly, is not relevant to the outreach really in a big way. And then I think what it allows you to do, especially if you're selling high value products, you're selling enterprise products where it makes sense to spend more time on this outreach. The human being can kind of come in once all of this work is done and kind of tweak it to reflect their personality and the shared values between them and the buyer. And I've talked a lot about this idea of shared values, but I want to elaborate on it real quick. What I mean there is you have to remember that people are very tribal. We like to associate with people who are similar to us. It's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. Every war that's ever happened in the planet is probably because of differing religions or races or ideas and things like that. It's not a good thing all the time, but it is it's biologically a part of us. We have a preservationist instinct. And so if you can play on that as a human being, that's where I think humans can come in and really add to their outreach. And these tools that can work in the background kind of handle what I would call the administrative work, the part of the work that's not the actual core of the message, but giving you insights you might not have otherwise had and helping you target better people so that they're getting more relevant outreach.
Yeah, I kind of resonate the same with you, right? Because just like the other tools you mentioned, Outplay also has an email writer. It also has an email scorer. So like you said, they should be more used to improve what you do as an SDR or a BDR today and not just rely totally on it, right? But,
Exactly.
while you're talking about all these tools, is there any good use case or any such experience that you've seen where AI has actually, helped an SDR become better at what they do and build authentic connections or build authentic outreach strategies?
Yeah, I think everything you just described is certainly ways I've seen it happen. I think that the biggest thing is really around sourcing the right people at the right time and even kind of generating a templated message and the cadences for outreach. Because I think the average is 17 touches to book a meeting or something like that. And so if you're manually having to manage every single touch in a sequence, that can be just incredibly challenging, especially if you're trying to do this at scale. And so, sometimes we joke about it, but I've seen people spend 15, 16, 17 outreaches before they get a response. And sure, your initial outreaches are going to riff off of some sort of personalization and human touch. And then as you go, like you actually kind of maintain that, in some ways. It's still possible to maintain that after multiple touches. But I'd say that that's like the biggest thing that you're going to see out there. I also think that this intent data is becoming more and more interesting. If you're able to automate kind of the surfacing of good contacts and leads with insights about them to make the SDR's job a lot easier, I'm starting to see that becoming more and more popular right now. It seems like it's a pretty trendy topic.
Got it. I mean, AI is still not as mature as what we expect it to be, of course, right? I mean, it's evolving. I mean, the very, the surface of it seems to be good, but then as it keeps improving, of course, there's a lot of interesting things that we do. But let me also understand this, right? When you have led sales teams, you have led SDRs, BDRs, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think it's wise for an SDR leader to coach or enable SDRs to use these AI tools, or do you think that they should stick to the traditional ways, traditional approaches of, writing the entire email, or like you said, writing the 17 touch points, or understanding what should be the call script, or what could be the first email, second email, or if they're going to probably do a voice note, write a voicemail or a voice note, what kind of things should be? So, that's very traditional. So what do you think your approach would be today with these AI tools fast approaching? Do you think that they should be trained on these AI tools, right? Or, go the traditional approach and let them figure out how to use these AI tools?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the answer is actually that it depends. I think it's really important not to be too rigid in your thinking, because the space is constantly evolving, and depending on what you sell, even within a certain industry or subsegment, there's going to be evolution on that as well. A good example of this would be that when COVID hit, a lot of people went remote, and all of a sudden you could direct dial people's mobile numbers with much greater success than you could historically. And this problem of having the proverbial gatekeeper in someone's office, like a secretary or an assistant, kind of went away. And actually that trend has, even though people have gone back to the office, a lot of people have not. And so, you are seeing that like mobile dial is a lot more successful than it used to be. And so if you're not open to the fact that this changes over time, then you're going to get left behind. There are certain industries for which automation just makes a lot more sense than others. If you have something of like a PLG motion, you might even have some basic bots on your website, chat bots that can handle very simple sales. You might not want to staff human beings to do a lot of this work, and a lot of your outreach might be a lot more automated. Whereas if you're selling to, let's say you have an account list of the 50 top US banks, it's a very limited account list. You might not want to be teaching too much in the way of automation. There might be parts of automation that are more relevant to you than others. So I talked a little bit about Humantic, right? This is a tool that gives you someone's disk profile and helps you message to them. Well, these are people that are getting contacted a million different ways. If you can get a slight edge by saying like, they're 10% more likely to respond if I use this type of greeting or this type of language, then why wouldn't you spend the time to do that? You should absolutely train your team on trying to make the customer feel as comfortable as possible, right? So I think it depends situation. I think what you want to be doing is always being aware of what's out there. You should be taking calls. You should be learning you should be well versed in what's going out there. You should be networking with other sales leaders and understanding what's working for them. But then also study your own data. And you need to be A/B testing, and you need to be, this is something that changes on a dime, the way that people respond to outreach. So I think it's a contextual situation, but more often than not, yes, I'd say.
Got it. Jeff, divulging a little bit here, right? What's your take on autonomous SDR as a platform? I'm sure you keep hearing that as a word, that it's going to be completely automated, and probably the last touch point could be a sales rep there. Is that going to be a thing at all in 2024?
It will. I think it'll swing back eventually in a certain way. So I think what's going to happen is you'll have the autonomous SDR, and I think it will take over a lot of more transactional sales environments. ones that are PLG or smaller ACVs. I think it'll completely take over, because why shouldn't it? Now, there's some complexity around that as you move up market. And like I said before, like the buyer still has a finite amount of time. We as sellers are getting access to a lot of great tools, but the buyer doesn't have more time in their day. And actually, what would be the best tool for us as sellers is if we could magically give our buyers 10 times more time and resources to spend with us, right? Because then we'd all have more success, but that's not the case. And so what happens is, if everybody's using the autonomous SDR, if it gains adoption and it gets widespread adoption, then what are you going to do beyond that? Because now you're just doing what everyone else is doing. And so it doesn't mean that autonomous SDR isn't something worth having. It means that you can have that, and you can layer on top of it the human to come in and add their human touch for especially like upmarket sales, where it's a lot more relevant to that buyer for you to share why you personally align with the value you're messaging them about, or why your company aligns with their values, right? There's space for both of those to exist in that scenario. So that's my take on it. I think it will be, initially you'll see some widespread adoption of it, but then what's going to happen is you're going to see not people getting rid of it, but that people will then start adapting how they're using it, and so that they can start to maintain a competitive advantage against their peers that are begging for the same people's time.
Brilliant, Jeff. I mean, that's very true. Like you said, I mean, that was a good example. Any PLG-led growth probably would need something like an autonomous SDR, but otherwise the human touch makes a difference. But like you said earlier, an SDR definitely needs to use AI, right? I mean, I read somewhere, I think it's very cliche today saying that, AI isn't going to replace people, but people who don't use AI gets replaced, right? So you kind of use it a little bit, right? But then considering that SDRs, BDRs are going to be using AI, how do you foresee, or what are the challenges you foresee in maintaining authenticity there? Because you said when you started, there has to be personalization. It cannot be commoditized, right? If I'm going to get a random email, for example, I work in the founder's office, right? So I work on strategy. I work on, deciding what tools we need to purchase or what services we need to take and so on. Now, if I'm going to get a very generic email, and if it sounds generic, I mean, that doesn't sound good to me, or I don't resonate with it at all, correct? So how do you foresee, or what do you foresee the challenges in maintaining authenticity there?
I think what I foresee is the challenges actually come down to the leadership level. It depends on the culture that you're trying to set within your organization. If you're running it like it's a, I don't know what the right word is here, but if you're really just preaching certain metrics and output and volume and, not really valuing the humanity within your own organization, then naturally that's going to extend outward from your organization to others, right? And so, the first thing that I've done, and every time I've hired SDRs, is first of all, I explain to them that they're the most important hires in the company, and that the company can't function without them. If we don't have leads, we don't sell anything, and they do what is otherwise a very thankless job. And the other thing that I tell them is, and I said this in my book too, but it's like, hey, look, there's all this AI out there. If I didn't think, if I thought that was the only thing I needed, then I wouldn't hire you. There's a reason that I'm hiring you. I'm going to teach you a framework, but I want you to be a human within that framework. You need to make people feel that there's actually a reason why they're there doing the job, and that why you value them and why their experience is going to be relevant. If they don't feel that way, if they're seeing is, hey, I need you to send 500 emails, they're going to say, well, anybody can do this job. They're not going to feel very good about themselves, and they're just going to go out and fire off 500 emails. And so I think the big danger is that bad leaders are going to have a really bad mindset about AI and how humans should use it. They're not going to see the humanity in their employees. They're not going to make them aware of it and make them value it and why they're doing the job. And then the employees are going to feel like they're soullessly, just firing things off without even really thinking. And so I think it just starts with leadership. Leadership needs to have a real grasp around this not being a simple thing where it's all or nothing. You don't see it as, hey, we're just automating, or we're not. There's ways to incorporate, like any technology, you incorporate it into what you're doing. you make it successful, but you also make the people understand, that they bring something unique to the table, and you want them to display that in their job. And I think if the leadership is not nuanced in their thinking, that's where you're going to see challenges for certain organizations.
Nice. That's very well said. I mean, human leaders probably bring that human touch in selling also. I mean, leadership is so important, right? But then I think it comes with the pressure that people need to hit numbers, they need to hit their quotas and things like that. It kind of blinds the leaders certain times, and then they push for those numbers. And then, the entire concept of personalization or the human touch is lost, right? So, I mean, Jeff, tell me this today, right? As we step into 2024, we are almost there. What are the 4-5 things that SDRs need to do to ensure there is human touch while using heavily? Because, overcoming the challenge. I mean, today, it's very simple, right? Honestly speaking, today, I don't know when was the last time I personally wrote an entire email, right? I'm going to use AI, give it 3-4 bullet points, give it the right prompt, and then, of course, review it and then, send an email. It's not that I'm going to just copy paste what the AI tool, tells me to do. But what are the 4-5 things you feel that SDRs, BDRs today need to do to maintain the human touch and not totally be dependent on an AI tool?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, I think that there's something to be said about, I've talked a lot about this, but I'll kind of give a more concrete example here. One is like they really need to lean into the shared values between them and the buyer, and that's really what's going to help them stand out. So I'll give you an example of this, something more concrete. I booked a meeting maybe a year ago with a very senior executive at Capital One. She had won these awards as being like a woman banker of the year and stuff like that. And she got some recognition for that. Banking is a relatively male dominated industry. So it's fairly significant when you see women who are winning these awards and they're kind of trailblazing a path. Now, a lot of people would probably congratulate her for winning this award, right? And she knows she won the award. Maybe they feel that, sucking up to the person is a way to, get into the account. For me, it actually personally meant something because my mother was the first woman in her law firm in a non-administrative role. And so, lawyer, the only woman in the law firm growing up. And, that was my role model growing up. And then my wife is actually a banker as well. And she works in a team of mostly men and whatever. And so I personally have respect for this person because in my personal life, I've seen women like her who are kind of trailblazing a path. So I told her the story. I'm like, hey, congrats on the award. But like, by the way, I actually means something to me. And here's why. And here's why that relates to the thing that I want to talk to you about. And so it's a subtle thing, but it actually makes a massive difference because now you're showing them like, hey, I'm part of your tribe. We have some philosophical alignment. Another mistake that people make is they'll start with this shared value and then they just pitch. They're like, hey, I saw you did this thing. I did this thing. Really cool. Anyway, I'm here to sell you this. And what happens is you lose it doesn't feel genuine then. It just feels like you used it as a hook. You need to make it relevant to what you're selling. And so an example of this would be many years ago, I booked a meeting with American Airlines. It's a long story, but I had a Twitter for my cat and the cat was tweeting with American Airlines and it went viral. And anyway, I told them the story, but I said, hey, like the reason I'm emailing you the story about my cat tweeting with you is because it showed me how much you value customer experience. You're tweeting with my imaginary cat here, because you're trying to win me over as a customer. That shows like some resilience in your customer experience, right? So like that's a reason why you're using the hook, and it makes it relevant to the thing you're selling and not just like something that you're using. It feels manipulative if you don't do that. One last thing I'll talk about is ideal customer profile. The worst thing that your SDRs can be doing is just spending time on the wrong people at the wrong time. You might, for a product that I've been selling recently, if the buyer has recently purchased certain software, they're actually not a good fit for us. And the reason is because they're going to be consumed with that for 1 or 2 years, and they won't really understand the problem we solve until later on. So it's good to know that ahead of time. If they just implemented the software, why are we contacting them right now? It's a waste of time, really. And so, if you can be thinking about, and SDRs often don't get access to this data, But if you can be sharing information about, hey, these are the attributes we're looking for. Here's how I'm going to make it easy for you to know when these attributes are being met. Here are the messages that work for people with these attributes. That's something that's helpful to SDRs, and they're not always getting access to that information regularly.
Awesome. Jeff, I think that's a brilliant way to close this session today, right? I mean, I think, be honest, connect with the values. I think that story that you said of how you connected your personal story when you reached out to this, powerful lady, and ensuring there is relevance. I think, that kind of summarizes how to be authentic in the AI world, right? And I'm sure SDRs, BDRs out there, as we step into 2024, use these amazing tips and ensure that their outreach is as authentic as possible, ensuring that they reach their quotas. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks so much. Amazing to having you today for this Outbound for Dummies from Outplay, right? And I'm sure we have more such coming, more such learnings from you in the coming months.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody. That was another session of Outbound for Dummies from Outplay. Follow us at LinkedIn for more such interesting series, and also follow us at outplayhq.com. We have a bunch of resources. We have amazing cold calls out there for you to listen and learn. We also have many beautiful new blogs that have come up. So go out to outplayhq.com to learn and grow. Thank you, everybody.